Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first episode of the new season of the Dochas webinar and podcast series. My name is Una, and I'm the project officer at the Irish Support Agency, and I also sit on the Mental Health and Wellbeing Working Group. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that I am hosting this webinar from the lands of the Camaragal people. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands in which all of you are watching. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Dochas will be brought to you on the first Monday of each month, with each session exploring a different aspect of health and well-being. All of our previous webinars can be found on the ISA YouTube channel and in podcast format on Spotify and Apple. If you have any questions throughout the conversation, please feel free to pop them into the chat box, but we will also have some time for questions at the end. So, to kick off the new season, we thought we would take it back to basics. With the growing number of Irish people relocating to Australia, navigating the country's complex mental health system can be challenging. So tonight, we will explore the support options available to you, with or without Medicare. We'll also delve into the different types of mental health services on offer, from psychiatry, psychology to counselling and psychotherapy. I am delighted to be joined tonight by Mary Sullivan, a mental health caseworker. Mary, thank you for being here with us this evening, given that you're in a different time zone to us right now. You're very welcome, and we really appreciate you being here tonight. So if it's all right with you, I thought we would just jump straight into it, as we do have quite a bit to get through tonight. So, Mary, I suppose with the increase in people who are seeking help, which is fantastic to see, but I imagine there are some people who still feel a bit of a level of anxiety about accessing mental health support. Do you have any insight as to why that might be and how we can reduce some of that feeling?
Well, first off, thanks so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here and seeing all you today. It's my pleasure. Um, yeah, I think it's great that there's been this movement recently towards speaking about mental health, speaking about mental well-being, checking in on friends, things like that. But I think especially as members of the Irish community, there is this stigma that's still there, or this shame sometimes around speaking about mental health, mental illness, around specific diagnosis of mental health. We've all heard she lives on her nerves, or he's just a bit blue, or actually naming those things can be really difficult. So I think it's important that we're all having an open dialogue about it, and that's why nights like tonight are so important.
Mhm.
I think as well, since COVID, there's been really good introductions of different ways to access mental health that's not just face to face in a clinical, white walled room with bright lights and, a doctor in a waistcoat or whatever. There's so many options. There's telehealth, there's phone call appointments, there's web chats, which we'll chat a little bit about later on. And I know Una's put together a really good list of resources for people. But it's just important to know that there is so many different options out there. So if you're feeling anxious about a face-to-face or looking someone in the eye the first time you speak about things, just know there's so many other options out there, so many different supports, and hopefully that'll, ease anxiety a little bit for people.
Yeah. And Mary, do you think at any point sometimes people might feel, well, they might use sort of comparison, well, oh, maybe I'm not too bad, maybe my symptoms aren't as bad as so and so, so I should be okay. I think it could be helpful, to let people know that, look, if you're not feeling good mentally, regardless of where you are on that scale, that there's different levels of support that you can access. You don't have to go full in straight into the deep end with it. You could just dip your toe and start exploring some, options that might be suitable for what you're experiencing right now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, no one knows what's going on in someone else's mind and in someone else's life. So thinking to yourself, oh, Sally from work actually seems like she has it all together and things are going well for her. Why can't I have it all together? Or, the opposite. Jesus, he's in bits, I'm grand.
Yeah.
You actually don't know what's going on. So it's really important to know if I'm feeling different to how I would usually feel, if I'm feeling lower than my baseline is, it's time for me to get some help. And like you said as well, people have varying degrees at different times of feeling well or feeling unwell. So catching that when it's at the very beginning and having lower levels of support is actually so helpful to stop things from snowballing and getting worse and from needing those intense supports. So no matter where you are on that, we can all benefit from a little bit of chat, a little bit of self-care, a little bit of looking after ourselves to stop things from getting to those levels.
That's a great point. Absolutely, Mary. So let's start with, because as an Irish Australian expat community, and we see it a lot at the ISA, when people are here on temporary visas, they don't have access to Medicare. And it can be such a big barrier for people accessing support because obviously there's more costs involved. But let's just, we will come on to that. But if we can talk a little bit about the supports that are available to those people who have Medicare. I know one of the biggest things at the moment, support-wise, is the mental health care plan. And maybe people have heard about it. What's actually involved in a mental health care plan?
So your number one thing, if you're looking to access support through a mental health care plan, is to contact your GP. So they're your go-to to get your plan together. So when you book that in, it's really important to make sure that you're booking a long appointment. You're not going to get through very much in 15 minutes. They're not going to have enough time to find out what's going on, to figure out what diagnosis might best suit the symptoms that you're presenting with, and then to be able to decide, what support is going to be best for you. So number one, call your GP. Number two, make sure it's a long appointment. And then number three, just be really, really open and honest with your GP. They're not there to judge. They're there to make sure that they get the best support for you. So it's important that they know exactly what's been going on for you, and what behaviors you've had and things like that, so they can direct you where to go. So with the care plan, they'll write it out with you. It's like a 2-page sheet of paper saying what diagnosis you have, what the symptoms are, and what your treatment plan is going to be. So with the mental health care plan, you can access up to 10 sessions of bulk billed or rebated support. So it's 10 individual sessions, so they would be one-on-one with a practitioner, and also 10 group sessions. So they can be online groups, face-to-face groups. So the sessions, it's really important to understand the fees and charges behind that and who can do them. So the practitioners could be psychologists, social workers, psychiatrists, and there are various fees attached to that. So if you're looking for someone that's going to be low cost, it's important to ask when you call, do they bulk bill? And are there any gap fees? So bulk billing would be Medicare paying X amount towards that session. And then the gap fee is what's left over after what Medicare will pay. So that's the out-of-pocket expense for you. So some places could be like $40, $30 a session, but others could be $120 gap fee a session. So it's important to ask that and to know what your budget is. Now, some of the psychologists I've found, especially around Sydney, are quite open to having a conversation around that. So if you explain to them what your situation is, they will have a couple of clients a year, a couple of spots that they'll leave for people that they will do fully bulk bills. But it's just an if and when and how many people they've taken on before. But it's always worth calling them and just explaining your circumstances and what's going on.
Yeah, that's great advice, because I think sometimes when people have the Medicare and they get the mental health care plan, that there's almost a little bit of an assumption that it's all going to be subsidized, like fully subsidized from then on for
Yeah.
those 10 sessions. And it's not the case, especially with psychologists and up like psychiatry, the fees can be significant. So although Medicare will, subsidize, that it's not full coverage, but it's a great point, letting people know your personal circumstances, and hopefully they might be able to do something for you. That's great, Mary. So aside from that, then, aside from the mental health care plan, say, I don't know, you've used your 10 sessions per year, which I suppose it's about, one a month. So if you're experiencing something quite significant that you feel that you might need additional support throughout the year, what would some of the other supports be available?
So I know in Sydney, in the Central Eastern health region, so CESPN is what they call it, there is a program called PSS. I think it's Psychological Support Service. I just have to
Mm-hmm.
double check that. But these are up to 10 sessions separate from your mental health care plan that your GP can apply for you to get support through them if you are in, circumstances where you're not working, you don't have the finances that you'd be able to continue on privately. You might have addiction issues or anything like that. So that's in the CESPN region. And then in the Sydney North Health region, there is a program called Access Plus, and it's the exact same. So you would need to go to your GP, explain to them your circumstances, that you've used up all of your mental health care plan sessions, and they would then apply for the support. Now they don't accept referrals where it's acute mental health. So if you're on that higher level of risk, and your mental health is up in that space where things are really, really tough at the moment, they won't be able to accept that referral. But if you are in the kind of moderate mental illness to milder concerns, they should be able to take that referral. They also, if you finish those 10 sessions and you still need more support, they will take another referral from your GP and consider it. It's not guaranteed, but they do consider it. And, if they think it's appropriate, they will stretch that out. There's also victim support services that you can apply. So if you've been a victim of a crime, that includes domestic violence. You can apply for up to 22 fully funded sessions. And they do also do payments for compensation payments for victims as well. That's just a side note, but just to know, if someone
Mm-hmm.
is a victim of a crime,
Mm-hmm.
that's there. Um, the other support is Head to Health. So this
Mm-hmm.
is a nationwide support. It's a 1-800 number. Anyone can access this one. And it's really helpful if you need to navigate the services. So if you're finding it really overwhelming to figure out, who has availability for psychology sessions, what's the fees, how can I get there, stuff like that, they're really helpful for helping you navigate that as well.
Okay, so we'll come back to Head to Health in 1 second, but with the PSS, the CESPN service, does that require, do you have to have the Medicare for that referral?
I'd have to double check that one. I do think you need the Medicare for that one. But we'll double check that. I'm sure we can attach that in the
Yeah.
list on the website.
And I think as well, for anyone who say they've been working for 10 sessions with a practitioner and they're really enjoying that relationship and getting a lot out of it, if if you don't want to move over to a completely different program, there could be some options with your private health insurance that might cover some counselling and psychology sessions that you might be able to claim on. Because I know when you develop that rapport with someone,
Definitely.
it could be quite difficult to move over to a completely different service. So it would be nice to think that people could stay working, with that practitioner, and maybe after the end of their 10 sessions, that could be an opportunity for a conversation like, look, I really like working with you, but I just feel like I need some support. Is there anything that you could maybe help me out with the fees somewhat, or I don't know?
Yeah,
But as you said, they're
definitely.
open to conversations. Yeah. Okay, so some great resources there, which will all be linked. So just coming back to the head to health, Mary, because I think this will lead us on, we do want to talk about the non-Medicare options, because we know that they're more limited, I suppose. So head to health, you don't need Medicare, is that right?
No, no Medicare. You don't need a GP referral, anything like that. So it's a nationwide 1-800 number. It is during working hours. So when you ring up, you will put in your postcode and you'll get directed to the service that covers your area. And they'll do an intake. So what that is really just asking you questions about what's going on right now, what stressors are presenting themselves, what's going to be helpful for you. Um, and then that will go to the team. So if they feel like it's an appropriate service for you, then you'll be allocated to work with a clinician. So it'll usually be a social worker, sometimes it'll be a nurse, and you've got 12 weeks of working with them. What they'll do is identify your goals, so things that are going to make life less stressful for you and improve your mental health. And they'll support you to link you to longer term services that can help with that on an ongoing basis. So it is a short term 12-week support, but as you said, you don't need to have Medicare, you don't need to have gone to a GP. Um, and things that they can help with. So they can help with, like I was saying, looking for psychology, psychiatry, things like that. But they can also help with the practical things that might be bogging you down. So it could be applying for the NDIS, it could be making sure that you've got your correct payments from Centrelink, it could be joining a group or a club, which I think is really underestimated how much that can support someone's mental health and well-being. Being part of a community, having a routine. I have to get up this morning because I'm meeting my swimming club, and we're going for a swim, then going for a coffee with someone after that, having that human connection and chat. So things like that are really important as well, and they're things that usually don't have a fee around them. So that is another important thing for people to know, that
Mhm.
clubs and sense of community and not feeling isolated is also really helpful for your mental health.
Mhm. What a great service that is, the head to health. So yeah, we'll definitely make sure to include their contact details. Um, I suppose when it, comes to choosing a practitioner, if you don't have Medicare, then you've got all of the upfront costs. And I think it would be really helpful for people to understand, the different types of practitioners that are out there, because if you've never had to use them before, they can all sound very similar. And, so I think it would be really helpful if you could maybe just share with us who can do what, who to see if, your symptoms are mild or severe, or, go through it in that way, Mary. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Look, it can be a complete minefield. And even myself, sometimes when I'm calling different supports for people, it's hard to get my head around who's doing what for them. Um, but I think if we're thinking about acute or more, difficult mental illness that people are experiencing, your number one person is usually your psychiatrist. So they can have, a higher fee attached to it, like Una was saying, but they're a really important person for diagnostic clarification. So what that means is really clearly deciding what diagnosis fits the symptoms that you're showing at the moment, and then medication review and management. So, looking at those symptoms, what's going on for you, and if it's at a stage where medication is going to be helpful for you, what's going to be most helpful, what dosage is going to be helpful for you, and then reviewing that on an ongoing basis. So, you're not being sent home with medication, then you get sleepy at night, and then you don't see someone again for a year, and that's affecting other parts of your life. So it's really important, if you're on those kind of higher meds, that you're seeing a psychiatrist and that you're seeing them regularly enough that they're able to review that medication and decide what's needed for you at any time. Following on from that, then there's psychologists. So there are clinical psychologists and then there are registered psychologists. So clinical psychologists are able to make those diagnoses as well. And then they're able to support you with therapeutic interventions. So they really think about what's going on for someone, how are they thinking, how are they feeling, and then how are they behaving, and working with you to identify what thoughts are coming into your head that aren't helpful, how they're making you feel, and then what they make you do. So what behaviors you're doing, and being able to catch that and say what behaviors would be more helpful for me going on from this. How can I stop my thoughts from spiraling the way that
Yeah.
they are?
Yeah.
Um,
That makes sense. Yeah.
then there's also social workers. So mental health accredited social workers are available in New South Wales, and you can access them through the mental health care plan as well. So they'll be able to do those therapeutic interventions with you, but they won't make those diagnoses.
Yeah.
If that makes sense at all. They won't be able to give you that diagnosis that you would get from a clinical psychologist or from your psychiatrist, but still really helpful in doing those pieces of therapy. The other one would be a psychotherapist. So they're really looking at what's happened in the past. So if you've got any traumas that have happened, any childhood experiences that influence your life now and that have you kind of stuck where you are, they look at what's gone on in the past and try and work through that so that you can move forward. Um, and then a kind of lower level from that then would be counselling. So that's really looking at the pushing forward. So currently and then onto the future, whereas
Yeah.
psychotherapy is looking at what's happened before and why is that making me feel stuck in where I am now. And then the kind of last lower level again from that would be coaching. So really that's all about well-being and what's going to improve my day-to-day, my routines, moving forward, how am I going to live a more whole, well, positive life. But I think it's important to note that a lot of coaches won't be trained in mental health, mental illness. So if you are at a more moderate level of distress, it would be important to be seeing one of the other professionals. And then maybe when you've gotten more stable in where you are and you want to just look at how can I improve my day to day and be the best me and function at my best level going forward, maybe to look at coaching then.
That's great. Yeah, such good points and all of that. And as you say, it's such a minefield for people who've never been in
Definitely.
that space before. And I suppose for anyone who's maybe they're not going down the GP route and but they do want to start talking to someone, would a good place to start be, looking at sort of what their current experience is and then just start making some inquiries. Is that sort of like a self-assessment almost that they would need to do, or
Yeah, I think that, having a little think about what's going on for me right now, what am I going to find most helpful? Everyone is different, everyone
Mm,
has different things going on. So some people might want a regular person to talk to every fortnight, every month. Some people might say, I just need one session
yes.
just to get everything off my chest, out of my
Yeah.
head, and then I'll be able to go on. And then in another little while, I might need to check in with someone again. So it's really trying to figure out what's going to be most helpful for you. I do think going to your GP and having a chat with them if you're unclear will be helpful because they'll be able to say, I think that this kind of professional could be helpful right now, or calling up this helpline whenever you need, if and when might be helpful. Because some people might even just need to call up one of the helplines that are 24/7. There might be something that's gone on at home in the family. There might be something that's happened in work, and you just need to get it all off your chest once, and then you're good to go. There are helplines to do that as well. So,
Yeah.
accessing mental health supports doesn't have to be an ongoing thing. It
Yeah.
can be sporadic whenever you
Yeah.
need.
Yeah. And I think it's also good to point out that if you are deciding to go down your own route and you want to choose your own practitioner, just make sure that they have the requisite skills to help you. And the majority of practitioners now will list their qualifications on their website or in their bio. They'll usually pretty clearly state, what they're trained in, and sometimes what they also do is they might give information about what they specialize in and what they're really trained to work in, whether that be grief or loss or check out what specialisms that they're also presenting with. And also just to say that one person's experience with mental health support might be very different to your experience. So you might have heard from a friend that they went to see a counselor and they didn't get on with them at all, and that's it. They're not going to try the mental health support anymore. And it can be a lot of trial and error, and
Definitely.
you do need to find that fit and that rapport, and you need to be sitting in front of someone who you really genuinely feel is going to be able to help you, but also wants to give you that support. So if you do make an appointment with someone and God, you don't feel like there was a connection or it was the right fit, don't let that put you off completely, because you can find someone who you do have that fit with.
Definitely. It's like friendships or meeting anyone or meeting a new partner. You're not always going to gel with everyone,
Yeah,
and it can take time to, yeah, get that fit. But once people do find that fit for them, you always see positive outcomes come out of it. There's no one that couldn't benefit from talking about what's going on for them, whether it's once, twice, ongoing. It's not going to hurt going to give it a go and trying someone new. So yeah, it's definitely really important to just don't give up at the first hurdle.
yeah,
If someone's not the right match for you, there's plenty of other practitioners out there. And like you said, if you go onto their websites, they'll literally list, specialized in anxiety,
yeah.
specializing in depression, in loss, in parent-child relationships. People will have that listed. So, like you said, doing your research and just giving it a go.
Yeah. And sometimes what practitioners now offer is like a 15-minute call, just for them also to get a sense as to whether they're going to be the right fit to help you. So they might say, okay, what's your experience right now? What's going on? And they'll be able to tell you. They might say, well, look, do you know what? I actually don't think I'd be the best person to work with you on that. So if they're a good practitioner, they'll tell you if they're not going to be the right fit for you. So Mary, just also to touch on people who are experiencing sort of acute mental illness. And I think it's such an untapped resource that people don't think about is the hospital and the emergency department. And
Definitely.
like, I know so many mental health nurses who are working in the hospitals over here, and I know that the service that they offer is incredible, and they're very highly trained to deal with those kind of acute mental illnesses. And I just don't think people are aware that if they can go to the ED if they need to. I don't know whether there's like they have to be experiencing certain symptoms in order to go. Do you know what the sort of the if there's any kind of prerequisite to showing up at AD?
Look, what I would always say to people is if you feel like you can't keep yourself safe,
Mm.
bring yourself to ED.
Yeah.
So if you feel like what I'm experiencing right now, I'm worried that I can't keep myself safe right now,
Yes.
bring yourself down to ED
Yeah.
and get yourself
Yeah.
seen. And look, if they feel like you're okay to manage through the night, they'll make sure that there's a safety plan in place for you, that there's someone that'll go home with you, that you've got a family or friend checking in. They'll make sure they won't let you leave the doors of the hospital until they know that you're going to be able to keep yourself safe as best as they can. So
Mhm.
I would say if you feel like I can't keep myself safe right now, it's time to go to ED. And you're
That's
more than
brilliant.
welcome to go
Yeah.
to ED. You know, that
Yeah.
way, that's what they're there for. They're trained in this. They want to keep you safe as well. So, like you said, bring your passport with you. You know, if you're an Irish citizen, we've got the reciprocal healthcare. So just make sure you bring your passport down with you. Or look, if you don't think of it at the time, give someone a text to drop it down to the
Yeah.
hospital. But it's definitely the best place to be if you feel like you're not able to stay safe, go down. The other one is to ring the mental health line. You'll find that online if you just look up New South Wales mental health line. If you call through to them and it's not a I can't keep myself tonight, but it's I don't think I can keep myself safe within the next week, they should be able to refer you to the community mental health team and to organise a psychiatric review if they feel like it's acute mental illness. It can't be, organised privately, organised through GP mental health care plan. So they would be the ones to call, or the suicide callback service are really good as well. So you can call them. Sometimes there's a little bit of a wait for these services on the phone is the only thing, but I would say stay on the phone. They will answer. I know it might seem like they won't, but they always will. You just need to stay on that phone and someone will come
Hmm.
and someone will answer,
Hmm. Hmm.
and they'll be able to direct you to where it's going to keep you safe. And if it means that they need to call an ambulance for you to your house, that's just what they have to do.
Yeah.
If it means that you need to ring a friend and say, I need a lift down to the hospital, I need someone to walk with me, they can support you in doing that as well.
Yeah.
But look, there are services out there. So never feel like you're a burden arriving to a
Yeah.
hospital. They're there to help you. That's their job. They
Yeah.
want to keep you safe.
Yeah. That's brilliant. And the fact that that is covered by the reciprocal healthcare agreement, I think that'll put a lot of people's mind at ease. Because
Definitely.
I think, at the end of the day, cost has to be one of the biggest barriers facing people when it comes to accessing support. Without doubt, it has to be. And so, if you feel that you don't have the funds, don't worry, just go down to the hospital and they'll look after you. I think that's fantastic. Yeah, great service there. And I know that on that mental health line, a lot of the times it's mental health nurses who are manning the phones, so it's
Yeah.
just another part of what they do. So it's really an incredible service. So yeah, make sure to share those resources. So Mary, just in terms then of we've obviously talked about some free services, the Head to Health, but I suppose and you touched on the crisis lines there, and there's so many different crisis lines, and some have specialisms and some are more general. Obviously, Lifeline is there, and it's sort of quite a broad mental health, support. But there's services, there's trauma helplines, there's grief helplines, there's LGBTQI helplines. I mean, these are all set up to support people with whatever they're presenting with. Who are on the end of these phones on the helplines when people call up? Are these people, trained to give people, what level of support are they able to give people?
Look, it really depends on the helpline. I can speak to Lifeline. I know that one of my colleagues, when I was working in Sydney, who would have been social worker, she volunteered for Lifeline. So the other volunteers with her would have been other mental health professionals who had volunteered their time, and
Hmm.
they would have gone through a couple of weeks of evening trainings before they went on the line, and then they did supervised calls, and then they went through to taking the calls by themselves. So
Hmm.
I know for Lifeline anyway, it would be volunteers, but professionals. I think that Q Life, which is for LGBTQI plus community, I know that that has practitioners. I've met one of the practitioners who worked for them before. Um, the other ones I'm not 100%, but anyone who would be on those lines would always have a degree of training before they
Yeah.
would ever be allowed to answer the calls. a lot of the time you'll hear as well, this call might be recorded for quality purposes, things like that. What that really means is that they have team leaders and clinicians that would listen to the calls to make sure that any advice that's being given is safe, and that it's in line with legislation and in line with what's going to keep people safe and well. So they are monitored, and any advice that someone is going to give you is going to be advice that's backed up by clinicians.
Brilliant. Yeah. And I suppose just to touch on one of the things that we get asked a lot at the ISA is in regard to people like talking to other Irish people. And so that kind of cultural background is very important for people. So what we've done at the ISA, we actually have a list of Irish practitioners in Sydney, but also I think there's one in WA and one in Queensland, and they do online support. But sometimes that can be the thing that sort of binds you to someone, is that understanding, that level of, not having to explain yourself over certain things. So that's a resource that we have. But also just to highlight a great resource that a lot of people are maybe unaware of. It's helplink.ie. And helplink.ie is an Irish service for any Irish diaspora across the world. Now it's not an acute service. It's for Irish people who maybe are living away from home and they're just having a difficult time, and maybe they're having trouble settling in somewhere, or friendships or breakups, that kind of thing. But you get 6 free sessions with a counsellor, and that's helplink.ie. And also the Samaritans Ireland opened up their call centre in Ireland for free phone calls from people in Australia. So if you call the Samaritans Ireland helpline, you'll get an Irish person and it won't cost you anything. So that could be another cultural sort of support for somebody. And I suppose, maybe looking to see what your employer might be offering. I hear that sort of the EAP. I think it's becoming more common. Would that be right?
Yeah, definitely. So the EAP, it stands for Employee Assistance Program. So that is 6 sessions. That can be for yourself, but it can also be for your partner or your immediate family to access support. So, if it is that your partner is going through a tough time and you have EAP through your work, they'll be able to access that as well. So a lot of companies do have it, so it's definitely worth checking out. And those 6 sessions are fully funded. So, there's not that cost element behind that as well. So it's definitely a really, really good service, and it's good to check out and see. You can just email your HR officer and work and ask them, do we have EAP?
Yeah. And I mean, it is obviously, if it's a resource available to you, tap into it. I suppose maybe sometimes in the workplace, people might have that little bit of a barrier in terms of other people being aware that they might be going through a difficult time. But honestly, it's a resource. So many people are accessing it these days. I also just wanted to touch base on like non-clinical interventions and the rise in peer-to-peer support. For example, there's a great service that I'm aware of. It's called Sydney Community Safe Space, and it's open on a Friday and Saturday night, but it's a drop-in service for anyone experiencing suicidality and ideation. And all of the volunteers in there are peer support workers and have lived experience. And I just think it's important that people know that it doesn't always have to be that one-to-one route. If you find that intimidating, or you feel like there might be any kind of judgment there are other options. And I can, give that list of resources again with those different options. But I think you touched on it at the start, the web chats and things like that. I think there's even like a texting service now, Mary, isn't that right?
Yeah, there's so many different ways. There's texting, web, like you said, groups, phone calls without video, a video call. There's so many different options, and those safe spaces, safe havens are absolutely brilliant. And I completely agree with you. I think that there's such a place for lived experience and peer support workers, Um, there's nothing like someone saying, I understand what you're going through. This is what's helped me. Maybe it'll help you, and something about looking at someone that's a little bit further along in their journey than you and being able to
Yes.
say, they've done it. I can do this. It can be done.
Yeah.
It's really, really invaluable.
Absolutely. And actually, the at the ISA, we host two mental health events per year. We do the Women for Women and the Shoulder to Shoulder, and we have a lived experience panel who come on and tell their own story.
Amazing.
And it's so powerful. Those personal stories of resilience, of overcoming, and even people who are still in the midst of something and just sharing their challenges and what it's been like, it's so impactful. And we've had so many people who've been to those events who've reached out for support because they said, well, I saw, he reached out, he got help. I thought, why not me? So I think you're so right. When you see someone else's personal journey, it can make such a difference. So
Definitely.
yeah. And just also wanted to touch base on people who may not be experiencing the mental health issues themselves, people supporting others. For example, like parents, like they could have, especially, in that kind of school going age when the challenges are so incredibly tough. We've all been through it. We know how difficult it can be. And I suppose even nowadays, even more so because of the various sort of challenges being faced. But if there's someone who's just looking for a bit of information on how to support someone else, is that something that Head to Health can help with, or do you have to be the person experiencing the crisis or the illness?
Well, look, if you're kind of thinking of it in terms of, I'm really stressed and really worried about my child, they're not doing well and that's impacting me as well, why not? That's impacting
Yeah.
you. You're feeling stressed from that as well. So I would definitely reach out. There's also Epic who you can call for support. And then I'd also just have a look and see if there's any parenting groups like programs. So something like Triple P is a quite well-known parenting program, or Circle of Security, um,
Okay.
or things like that. Or I would even think about calling maybe Headspace. So they support
Yes. Yeah.
12 to 25. So calling Headspace, or if it is the young people themselves, maybe encouraging them to call the kids helpline or to have a look on Kids Helpline online. Um, but definitely there are supports out there for parents. And like you said, that school age, it's so important to make
Yeah.
sure that, you're doing everything you can to support that
Yeah.
young person, and that you know what's out there, because I do think that's a big thing for parents is they feel really helpless. I can see my young person struggling and I really, really want to help, but I just don't know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
definitely reaching out to some of those services for advice. And look, if it's the case that the young person doesn't want to go or isn't in a space where they're able to engage with support themselves, I think that's incredible for parents to
Yeah.
look and see what groups and what trainings and
Yeah.
what can I do so that in the house I can be implementing things that are going to
Yeah.
make life a little bit
Yeah.
easier for them.
Yeah. And you mentioned Headspace there. I think they're one of the sort of leaders in that kind of youth mental health. Is
Yeah.
that, do they offer counselling, or is it like a more of a helpline that Headspace
Yeah,
is?
so Headspace does do face-to-face one-on-one counseling. So they would offer that. I think a lot of them will have a psychiatrist that's linked up to the team as
Oh,
well. And they do run groups. And I know that in Sydney they do have an early psychosis program as well for young people.
okay.
Um, that's really, really helpful too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they do have, you can call them up, but they also do have face-to-face centres.
Yeah.
I think there's one in Bondi Junction,
Okay.
in
Right.
Sydney,
Yeah.
and then there's one out west as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
definitely worth, looking
Yeah.
them up if you've got a young person
Yeah.
that you're worrying about.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, so many amazing resources mentioned tonight, and I'm sure there's plenty more. As I said, the list it's up there on the ISA website. It's still in development. And look, if you're listening to this and we haven't touched on maybe a service that you're looking to connect in with, get in touch with us and we will do that research and we will get you linked in, or we'll give you the information to make that connection based on your own circumstances, because there is so much coverage here. And it's one thing, I think, living in Australia, that we are very grateful for the mental health services and support that are available to us, because I know in Ireland it is very challenging. And look, obviously there's a bigger population here and there's more people to service, but I just know that, people moving through the system, it is very well serviced. So that is absolutely fantastic, a great resource. And I'd now like to see if anyone would have any questions, maybe for Mary, or please feel free to turn off your mic, or you can pop something into the chat. Aisling.
Thank you so much, Mary, for that. That was really informative, and I really feel it'd be incredibly helpful for the community. I know that you touched base on the victim services counselling for family and domestic violence. Just wondering, from my understanding, that's if it's happened in New South Wales, but if it's something that maybe has happened back at home or out of state, what services or pathway, I suppose, particular to that, could a person call or contact just to get that like specialized support, I suppose?
So I think if it has happened outside of New South Wales, someone that would be really good to call would be the DV line, to get advice off them, or 1-800-RESPECT as well. There's also a website called Ask Izzy. So if you go onto that and you pop in, what's going on for you. So there's loads of different categories on that. So you'll be able to select domestic violence. That'll show you what supports would be available to you in the area. So it could be getting some, some talk therapy through a phone line or something like that, but they might be able to direct you to other services. The other one would be Men's Line as well, which is important to know that, there's a specific support there for men that have experienced that as well, that they're able to call them up to.
Great, yeah. And also just to touch on the work that's been done by not-for-profit organisations. There's some incredible not-for-profit organisations dedicated to victims of DV. So, if you're looking online, type in charities that support, people experiencing DV. And there are some really great resources out there, coming from a charity perspective. So great question, and something I wasn't aware of, that the crime for victims services had to be committed in New South Wales. So that's interesting. Thank you so much, Aisling.
Thanks so much, Aisling.
Any other questions there this evening, folks? So as I said, this resource, the recording will be up online, and you can also listen to it in podcast format if you're going out for a walk and you just want to pop your earphones in. But I suppose the bulk of the resources will, the contacts, the crisis lines, the web links, they'll all be going up online as well. There's some up there now, but just based on our chat tonight, I'm going to add a few more to it, because there's some great resources there. But listen, Mary, just wanted to say thank you so much. You're over in WA now, so
it's gotten dark here now. I can see outside.
So you're just starting into your evening at 6 o'clock, and it's almost 8 here. So really appreciate your time, and it's great work that you're doing, and great information that you've shared with us tonight. So really appreciate it, and thanks everyone for joining us. I think, as Mary said at the start, it's important to have these conversations, and we just wanted people to know, have the information to make informed decisions, to know what's out there, because it can be very confusing. So we hope this has been helpful, and we'll see you next month for our next episode in October. So see you then. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.